I will never forget the specific Tuesday that shattered the glass casing of my life. Before that day, my existence had become a series of perfectly manicured, silent moments. I was living in a museum of my own making, where nothing was ever out of place, and nothing ever truly happened. But that morning, the script changed entirely. I woke up just as the sun was cresting the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and gold. I brewed my usual dark roast coffee, the aroma filling the high, ceilinged kitchen that always felt just a little too large for one person. I took my porcelain cup and stood by the bay window, observing the neighborhood waking up. I was 62 years old. To the outside world, I was a woman who had aged with grace. I waged a private, diligent war against time. I swam laps every morning, I ate clean, organic meals, and I dressed with intention. When I looked in the mirror, I tried desperately to convince myself that the woman staring back was still vibrant, still desirable, still me. But underneath the polish and the expensive skincare, there was a hollow space I couldn't seem to fill. A quiet ache that whispered to me when the house was still. Until I met Leo. He was the courier for our route. He was 23 years old, decades my junior, but it wasn't just his youth that captivated me. It was his frequency. He vibrated with an energy that I felt I had lost long ago. Over the last 6 months, I had developed a shameful, secret habit. I began ordering things I didn't need. Hardcover biographies I would never read, decorative throw pillows, kitchen gadgets for meals I wouldn't cook, all of it just to manufacture an excuse. I needed to hear the heavy thud of the delivery truck, the chime of the doorbell, and see that crooked, radiant grin. I told myself it was foolish, even inappropriate. I chided myself in the mirror. But my heart, a traitorous thing, hammered against my ribs every single time he walked up the path. That afternoon, the weather had turned. The sky was a slate gray, threatening rain. I stepped onto my porch to retrieve the morning mail just as Leo turned the corner on his delivery scooter. He saw me, he always saw me, and raised a gloved hand to wave. But his attention slipped. His front tire hit a patch of loose gravel and wet leaves near the curb. The bike skidded violently, losing traction, and he went down hard, sliding right to the edge of my driveway. A scream caught in my throat, raw and terrified. I dropped my mail, the envelopes scattering like white birds, and I sprinted toward him. My pulse was a drum in my ears. He was tangled near the curb, the heavy bike pinning his leg, his uniform torn at the shoulder. "Leo," I gasped, falling to my knees on the damp asphalt. He groaned, pushing the bike off him with a grimace. His forearm and shin were scraped raw, the skin angry and red, oozing blood. Pain tightened his features, pinching the corners of his eyes. Yet, incredibly, as he looked up and saw the panic on my face, he tried to smile. "Evelyn, hey, I'm okay?" he rasped. His voice was a deep baritone that wavered slightly, betraying the shock. "Just a bruised ego. Nothing broken." "Don't be absurd," I said, my voice commanding but shaking uncontrollably. "You are bleeding. I am not letting you get back on that machine. Come inside now." I helped him lift the scooter, leaning it against the oak tree. Then, I wrapped my arm around his waist to support him. He was heavy, solid muscle and radiating heat. He tried to protest, muttering about schedules and being dirty, but I wasn't hearing it. "Lean on me," I instructed. We walked up the path, his boots scuffing the stone, my silk blouse pressing against his rough jacket. Once we were inside, the silence of the house seemed to swallow us. I guided him to the plush velvet armchair in my sitting room. "Stay," I ordered softly. I retrieved the first aid box from the hallway closet and returned. I began the delicate work of cleaning the grit from his arm with antiseptic wipes. My hands trembled, a betrayal of my nerves, but I focused intently on the wound so he wouldn't see my eyes. Up close, the contrast was stark. My hands, with their prominent veins and manicured nails, against his skin, which was tanned, scarred, and resilient. But as he watched me work, I noticed a depth in his gaze that felt far older than his 23 years. He wasn't looking at the wound, he was studying my face. "I really am sorry to barge in like this, Evelyn," he said softly, the name rolling off his tongue with a familiarity that made my stomach flip. "Most people just want the package and the door closed. You're different." I laughed, a nervous, breathless sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. "You crash at my feet and expect me to wave goodbye. I'm not that cold, Leo. I'm not a statue." I applied the antibiotic ointment, and he hissed in a sharp breath. "Sorry," I whispered. "It's okay," he said. "It's a good kind of sting." As I smoothed the adhesive of the bandage over his forearm, the room fell silent again. It wasn't an empty silence, it was thick, charged with static electricity. My fingers lingered on his skin a second too long. When I finally pulled back, our hands brushed, fingertip to fingertip. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, pressurized, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Evelyn, he started, his voice dropping an octave, losing its boyish charm and replacing it with something more rugged. I didn't expect you to care this much. It's nice being seen, really seen. Something in his tone unlocked a heavy iron door inside me. The filter I usually applied to my words evaporated. You aren't just a career to me, Leo, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I watch you work. You have a kindness about you. Honestly, seeing you is the only thing that makes me feel truly awake lately. Everything else is just waiting. The confession hung in the air, raw and unplanned. A flush rose to my cheeks, hot and stinging. I couldn't believe I'd said it aloud. I started to turn away, to retreat to the kitchen, to hide. But Leo didn't look away. His expression shifted from gratitude to something more intense, a look of recognition. He leaned forward slightly, wincing as his bruised knee shifted, closing the distance between us. The atmosphere was magnetic, you know? He said after a beat, his eyes locked on mine. My commute is killing me. My apartment is an hour away, in the city, and the rent is skyrocketing. They're kicking everyone out next month for renovations. I've been thinking about moving closer to the route, but I can't find anything I can afford. He looked down at his hands, vulnerable. I'm exhausted, Evelyn. Just tired of running. The solution came to me instantly, terrifying and thrilling all at once. It was a cliff and I was standing on the edge. Leo, I said, steadying my voice, trying to sound like the composed homeowner I was supposed to be. The carriage house, behind the garden. He looked up. Why, I have a guest house, I explained, gesturing vaguely toward the backyard. It's fully furnished. It has its own kitchen, a separate entrance. It's been empty for 3 years since. Well, for a long time. You could stay there. The rent would be minimal, just enough to cover utilities. He looked stunned, his mouth slightly open. Evelyn, you don't have to do that. That's too generous. You barely know me. I want to. I insisted, surprising myself with my own firmness. It's a waste of space, and honestly, it would make me feel safer having someone else on the property. He looked at me, searching for a catch, searching for pity. He found neither. He found only hope. Are you sure? He asked. I have never been more sure of anything. I lied. I was terrified. But I knew in that split second that my quiet life was over, and I was glad. The very next morning, a beat-up moving van pulled up to the curb. I watched from the kitchen window hidden behind the linen curtains, as Leo and 2 of his friends hauled boxes. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the way he moved. The strength in his shoulders, the easy confidence, the way his T-shirt clung to his back. It stirred memories of feelings I thought had died and turned to dust long ago. I brewed a large pot of coffee and brought out a pitcher of iced tea for the crew. I walked out onto the lawn, the grass wet with dew. You must be exhausted, I said, offering the tray. Leo wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm and beamed at me. Evelyn, you're a lifesaver. He introduced me to his friends, 2 loud, cheerful boys who looked at me with polite indifference. But they couldn't stay. They had to return the rental truck by 5. I guess it's just us for the housewarming, Leo said, standing on the patio as the van drove away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in the autumn air. He looked at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I didn't mean to impose on your evening. Nonsense, I smiled, feeling a flutter in my chest. I made a roast, and I suppose I should open a bottle of wine. You can't celebrate a new home with just iced tea. That evening, he came to the main house for dinner. He had showered and changed into a clean, button-down shirt that looked slightly wrinkled but charming. I had set the table with my good china, dimmed the lights, and lit 2 taper candles. The conversation flowed effortlessly, aided by the rich, dark red wine. We talked about books, about the city, about his dreams of studying architecture, about my past career in art restoration, loneliness. I admitted later, after the second glass, twirling the stem of my crystal goblet. It's a quiet kind of madness. It creeps up on you. I've spent decades looking after others, maintaining this house, keeping up appearances. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to live for myself. I became a curator of my own life, rather than a participant. Leo listened with an intensity that made my heart race. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look around the room. He looked at me. It's hard to believe you're lonely, Evelyn, he said softly. Your home, this dinner, the way you speak, the way you dress, it's all so beautiful. You create beauty. He paused, taking a breath. You are beautiful. It's criminal that you're alone. The compliment landed heavily, shattering the last of my defenses. I looked up, locking eyes with him. The candlelight reflected in his dark pupils. No one has spoken to me like that in a very, very long time, I whispered. I feel invisible most days, like a ghost in my own life. He set his glass down on the mahogany table with a soft clink. He leaned forward. Then they haven't been paying attention. he said, his voice fierce. It is impossible not to notice you. You walk into a room and the energy changes. You have a light, Evelyn. It's not a flash in the pan, it's a slow burn. It's mesmerizing. The wine and the words swirled together in my head. The space between us across the table seemed to evaporate. Leo, I whispered, you make me feel visible. The tension finally snapped. It was no longer an undercurrent, it was a tidal wave. Evelyn, he said, standing up. He held out his hand. Come here. I stood, my legs trembling. I took his hand. His palm was calloused, warm, and electric. He pulled me gently away from the table. I need to be honest, he said, looking down at me. When I accepted the apartment, I told myself I just needed a place to sleep. But sitting here with you, I don't want to go back to the guest house tonight. I want to be near you. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would bruise my ribs. I don't want you to go either, I admitted. He leaned down. His gaze dropped to my lips. Caught in the spell, I leaned in too. Our lips brushed, tentative at first, a question asked and answered. Then, he kissed me. It wasn't the kiss of a boy, it was the kiss of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. It tasted of wine and longing and lost time. Panic flared in my chest, warring with desire. The voice of society, of my age, of propriety, screamed in the back of my mind. I pulled back abruptly, my hand flying to my mouth. This isn't right, I murmured, backing away. I'm old enough to be your. This is complicated. You're confused. I stumbled toward the kitchen, needing to put space between us, needing to escape the storm I had invited in. I barely made it to the granite counter before I felt his hands on my waist. He hadn't let me go. He turned me around gently but firmly, trapping me between the counter and his body. Evelyn, he said, searching my face, his eyes dark and dilated. Don't run. Don't you dare tell me what I feel. I am not confused. I am right here. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of my collarbone. Do you want this? Tell me to stop, and I will walk out that door and never cross the line again. But tell me the truth. I looked at him. I saw the raw desire, the admiration, the heat. I realized that for the last 10 years I had been preparing for death. But here was life, standing right in front of me, asking to be let in. My breath hitched. Yes, I breathed. I want this, I want you. He didn't hesitate. He swept me into his arms, kissing me again, deeper this time, possessing me. We moved toward the bedroom, a tangle of limbs and whispers. In the soft, amber light of the bedroom, my insecurities tried to surface. I worried about the softness of my stomach, the lines on my face, the gravity that had touched my body. But Leo didn't give me time to hide. He undressed me with a reverence that brought tears to my eyes. Perfect. He murmured against my skin. You are incredible. As my silk dress fell to the floor, pooling at my feet, I caught a glimpse of us in the full-length mirror across the room. Him strong, tawny, youthful muscle. Me silver-haired, curved, mature. It was a contrast that should have been jarring, yet it was artistic. It was a painting of contrasts that fueled the fire rather than extinguishing it. I lay back on the crisp white sheets and Leo hovered over me. His eyes locked onto mine, his hands resting on my waist, moving slowly, memorizing me. In that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt powerful. I felt desirable. I want you more than I've wanted anything, he whispered. It didn't take long for me to respond to his touch, letting out a sound of pure relief and pleasure that surprised even me. I didn't know where to place my hands, on his shoulders, in his hair, on his back. It was as if I couldn't get enough of the tactile reality of him. Everything was so beautiful, so heightened. The emotions overwhelming me were intensified by the sheer improbability of it all. I closed my eyes, letting myself get lost in the sensation, in the rhythm of two bodies finding a common language. When I opened them to look at Leo, I saw him flushed and breathless, his face open and vulnerable. That sight excited me even more than his touch. Again, I whispered, half delirious. Don't stop. Leo, catching his breath, laughed softly against my neck. I couldn't stop if I tried. That night, on the tangled sheets, I wasn't a 62-year-old widow waiting for the end of the story. I was the protagonist. I was alive and burning. Every touch was a reclamation of the years I had lost to sorrow and propriety. Afterward, as the room cooled and the rain began to tap gently against the window pane, we lay in comfortable silence. He pulled the duvet up over us, tucking me in against his side. The only sound was our synchronized breathing, a slow, steady rhythm that felt like peace. I looked at the floor beside the bed. My sensible shoes were kicked over next to his heavy work boots. My dress lay tangled with his shirt. I smiled into the dark. Leo shifted, his arm tightening around me, his breath warm on my shoulder. You okay? He mumbled, half asleep. Better than okay, I whispered. The void was gone. My quiet, routine, gray life was gone. And as I closed my eyes, Listening to the heartbeat of the man beside me, I knew I wouldn't miss it for a second. This was not the end of the story. It was merely the first page of the volume I had always been meant to write.